We are living in a moment that feels ordinary on the surface and extraordinary beneath it. The clocks still tick, the sun still rises, people still go to work, scroll through their phones, drink their coffee, and return home as if everything is as it has always been. Yet something profound is happening beneath the visible layer of reality. The Earth timeline split is happening now, not as a dramatic explosion in the sky, not as continents breaking apart, but as a subtle yet powerful divergence in consciousness. It is a silence, a shift so deep that those who are not aware of it cannot even hear the echo of change. They cannot hear you anymore because they are tuned to a different frequency of reality. This split is not about geography. It is not about nations dividing or borders shifting. It is about perception dividing, awareness separating, and vibration choosing its direction. There are people who feel that time itself has changed. Days seem faster, events seem heavier, emotions seem amplified. This sensation, it is the friction created when two timelines begin to drift apart while still sharing the same physical space. One timeline is rooted in fear, control, distraction, and denial. The other is anchored in awareness, responsibility, inner growth, and awakening. Both timelines exist simultaneously, but they are moving in different directions. Blend. The reason they cannot hear you anymore is not because your voice is weak. It is because your signal no longer matches their receiver. When consciousness shifts, language changes. The same words carry different meanings. The same events trigger different reactions. You may speak of growth, truth, and liberation while they interpret threat, chaos, and danger. It feels like speaking across a glass wall. You see them, you care for them, you try to reach them. But your frequency is rising, and theirs is stabilizing within another band of reality. The split is subtle, but undeniable. This divergence has been building for decades. Every technological advancement, every social transformation, every crisis has accelerated it. Information flows faster than ever before, yet understanding grows thinner in certain spaces. Connectivity increases, yet genuine connection decreases in others. The timeline split is not caused by technology alone, but technology amplifies the direction each consciousness chooses. Those who seek distraction find infinite distraction. Those who seek knowledge find infinite knowledge. The tools are neutral, but the outcomes differ based on awareness. In one timeline, fear dominates decisions. In that stream of reality, comfort is valued above truth, and conformity is valued above authenticity. People in that space do not necessarily intend harm. They are simply overwhelmed. They cling to narratives that promise stability, even if those narratives are illusions. They defend systems that limit them because those systems feel familiar. When you speak of change, they hear instability. When you speak of awakening, they hear judgment. When you speak of freedom, they hear risk. The resonance does not align. In the other timeline, responsibility replaces blame. Individuals begin to understand that reality responds to inner alignment. They question inherited beliefs. They detach from manipulative patterns. They recognize that growth is uncomfortable but necessary. They do not see chaos as destruction, but as transformation. This timeline requires courage because it demands self-examination. It requires letting go of identities that once felt secure. It asks for emotional maturity in a world addicted to emotional reaction. It is not the easier path, but it is the more conscious one. The split is not about superiority. It is about choice. Every moment presents an opportunity to align with one frequency or another. The earth itself is not dividing physically, but the collective field of consciousness is reorganizing. Old systems built on exploitation and deception are struggling to sustain themselves. New frameworks based on collaboration and transparency are emerging. The tension between these structures creates the sensation of instability. What feels like collapse in one timeline feels like liberation in another. Many feel isolated during this transition. They look around and sense that the conversations they once had no longer satisfy them. Entertainment that once amused them now feels empty. Arguments that once consumed their energy now seem pointless. This is not arrogance, it is evolution. When internal priorities shift, external resonance changes. The loneliness that appears during this stage is temporary. It is the space between worlds, the bridge between old identity and new alignment. It is the quiet corridor. They cannot hear you anymore because they are invested in preserving a narrative that defines their identity. To hear you would require them to question themselves. It would require them to examine the foundations upon which they have built their understanding of the world. That level of introspection can feel threatening, so the mind protects itself by filtering out incompatible signals. This is not malice. It is psychological survival within a specific timeline. But as you evolve, your responsibility is not to force resonance. It is to maintain integrity. Generally, the Earth timeline split is also visible in how people respond to crisis. In one stream, crisis produces division, blame, and polarization. In the other, crisis produces innovation, empathy, and cooperation. The same event can generate fear in one group and clarity in another. This divergence shows that reality is not merely external circumstance. It is interpretation shaped by consciousness. As awareness expands, interpretation shifts. As interpretation shifts, experience transforms. This is how timelines separate without any physical boundary. The acceleration of time that many feel is connected to this phenomenon. As consciousness expands, perception of time compresses. Moments become more intense. Lessons arrive faster. Patterns reveal themselves quickly. There is less tolerance for stagnation. In the denser timeline, time feels repetitive and exhausting. In the awakened timeline, time feels purposeful and catalytic. The difference lies not in the clock but in the observer. Perception determines experience. This split demands emotional discipline. Reactivity feeds the lower timeline. Awareness feeds the higher one. Every reaction rooted in anger without reflection strengthens the density of the old pattern. Every response rooted in clarity strengthens the emergence of a new structure. The battle is not external, it is internal. It is fought within thoughts, habits, and daily decisions. Small actions accumulate into large shifts. Integrity in private moments influences collective direction more than dramatic public gestures. As systems tremble, many will attempt to pull others back into familiar patterns. They will mock growth. They will dismiss awareness. They will label change as delusion. This resistance is part of the separation process. When a structure begins to weaken, it tightens its grip. When a belief system feels threatened, it amplifies its voice. This amplification can appear overwhelming, but it is often a final surge before transformation. Stability built on illusion cannot endure sustained awareness. Compassion remains essential during this split. Those who cannot hear you are not enemies. They are souls at a different stage of recognition. Forcing awakening creates resistance. Embodying awareness creates influence. Presence communicates more powerfully than argument. Consistency communicates more clearly than debate. As you stabilize within your chosen timeline, you become a living example of its potential. Energy speaks where words fail. The natural world mirrors this transformation. Environmental changes, climate shifts, and ecological instability reflect the imbalance within collective consciousness. As humanity separates internally, the planet responds externally. The Earth is not punishing, it is recalibrating. Harmony requires alignment. When exploitation dominates, correction follows. In the awakened timeline, stewardship replaces dominance. Respect replaces extraction. Collaboration replaces conquest. These principles are not abstract ideals. They are survival strategies for a sustainable future. Banda financial systems, educational structures, and political frameworks are also experiencing strain. In one timeline, control tightens and transparency decreases. In the other, decentralization and accountability increase. Trust is shifting from centralized authority to individual discernment. This transition is messy because power resists redistribution, but consciousness inevitably outgrows confinement. The more individuals reclaim responsibility for their perception, the less effective manipulation becomes. The phrase "they cannot hear you anymore" also reflects emotional boundaries. As you grow, you stop engaging in conversations that drain your energy. You withdraw from cycles that repeat without resolution. This is not abandonment. It is alignment. You are not required to shrink your awareness to maintain comfort for others. Growth sometimes means walking quietly in a new direction without waiting for permission or validation. Silence can be an act of strength. There will be moments when doubt arises. The noise of the denser timeline can be loud. Media cycles amplify fear. Social pressures encourage conformity. During those moments, grounding becomes essential. Reflection, meditation, creative expression, and connection with nature anchor consciousness. The split is not sustained by constant intensity. It is sustained by steady clarity. Discipline replaces drama. Intention replaces impulse. Planned over time, the separation will become more visible. Communities aligned with awareness will form stronger bonds. Innovation will emerge from collaboration rather than competition. Healing practices will integrate science and intuition. Education will prioritize critical thinking over memorization. Leadership will be measured by integrity rather than dominance. These shifts will not occur overnight, but they are already unfolding. The seeds are planted in quiet places. Blend the Earth timeline split is not an apocalypse. It is an awakening. It is the shedding of outdated paradigms. It is the refinement of collective consciousness through contrast. Both timelines serve a purpose. One reveals the consequences of unconscious living. The other demonstrates the power of intentional evolution. Each individual contributes to one or the other through daily choices. In this moment, the most powerful action is alignment. Speak truth without aggression. Set boundaries without hatred. Pursue growth without arrogance. Release the need to convince those who are not ready to listen. Your energy is better invested in building rather than arguing. When enough individuals embody clarity, the field shifts naturally. Transformation becomes inevitable. We stand at a crossroads that does not appear on any map. The decision is internal. The direction is vibrational. The split is subtle but real. You feel it in conversations that no longer flow. You sense it in priorities that no longer match your surroundings. You witness it in the widening gap between fear and awareness. The Earth timeline split is happening now, quietly, steadily, without dramatic announcement. And as it unfolds, your responsibility is not to drag others across the divide. It is to walk your chosen path with conviction, compassion, and unwavering integrity, knowing that even if they cannot hear you anymore, your clarity still shapes the world around you.